was doing a lot of Anki. But
like, how many hours a day were you spending
all of
on
them.
So during my recent trip to New York, I had the opportunity to interview Xiaoma in person. Now, I don't think Xiaoma really needs an introduction, as he's probably the most well-known creator on YouTube that makes language learning related content. But just in case, I'll say that if you somehow manage to stumble across this video without knowing who Xiaoma is, then definitely check out Xiaoma's channel as well. Now, I decided to split up the interview into 2 parts. This video is part 1, where we cover the nitty-gritty of exactly how Xiaoma learned Mandarin, and in part 2, which I'm going to upload in a couple of days, we talk about Xiaoma's journey of becoming a successful creator on YouTube, so make sure to stay tuned for that as well. Now, finally, before I jump into the interview, I just wanted to say, if you guys are learning a language and you want to reach fluency like I have in Japanese and Xiaoma has in Mandarin, then I highly recommend checking out refilled.la, where there's a comprehensive roadmap of exactly how to use immersion learning to reach fluency in a foreign language. On the Refilled website, you'll also find a link to our free Discord community, as well as the Refilled Patreon, which has tons of exclusive content like Q&As and live streams. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the interview.
Welcome to New York City, man. What's up,
thanks
dude?
so much.
How are you?
Oh, man.
Yeah, man. It's good to see you in person, for real.
3 dimensions.
With your Evangeline shirt.
Oh yeah, no, but there's a story behind this, but that's for another day.
Oh man, you're a weeb, but you can actually speak flawless Japanese. So
Oh yeah, we're gonna explore that topic in a lot of depth.
Yeah,
coming up. But yeah, no. But today we're here to talk about you.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of 2 main topics I think it'd be really cool to talk to you about. One of them is about learning Chinese.
Right.
And the other is just about being a creator in the kind of language learning space.
Yeah.
So I guess getting started with learning Chinese. So what's the origin story of you in Chinese?
Of Chinese. It was really random. Like, I was graduating high school and I didn't have anything to do, and I was just like bored, and I was looking through like the classified section of the New York Times back when they actually had like paper. There was this ad that was like, hey, free Chinese class for high school students. So I emailed it. I wasn't a high school student, I technically graduated, but I asked her anyway, like, hey, can I do this? And she was like, sure, come on in. It was like a government-sponsored Chinese program to like increase critical language, fluency in high school kids. So I did it, and I loved it. I was like, wow, this is great. So then when it was the first really modern language that I had really ever studied.
Were you interested in languages at the time?
No, but I knew I was good at it. Like I knew that I had like, because I had studied like Latin and Greek, like classical kind of languages, but I never actually spoke it. But I knew that it was something that like I was interested in. But I really had absolutely zero idea that like I was interested in learning to speak other languages. I had never tried doing that before. I had no experience with Spanish. I had no experience with actually trying to speak another language. So it was totally new to me. But I ended up really liking it. And, I went on to like college, and I did Chinese 101 there, and I really liked that. So I decided, they were handing out like this kind of like flyer for like, learn, Chinese, go do the Chinese government scholarship. It was like a thing you could apply for and get it. And I didn't know at the time what I wanted to major in and do. So, it seemed like an interesting way to postpone like the eventual decision that I had to make for actually what to do in my life. So I was like, all right, this sounds great. So I did that program, and I applied for the Chinese government scholarship, and I got it. And the Chinese government said, hey, we will pick the city and the university for you to go to and learn Chinese, and we'll pay everything. And they covered my entire bill while I was in China. Like, they paid for the tuition. Yeah, it was great. And so, and I think still to this day they have it. So they'll pay you to go learn Chinese in China. So they did that, and I did that for a year, and it was great. It was amazing. Went to Beijing Language and Culture University. Had a great time there. And then when it was just like for me going there was real. Like I really felt like I almost like became an adult in certain ways. Like it was really my first time very much out of my comfort zone. I had never been outside of the country, outside of the U.S. before, and in being there in China, just like seeing all the like the sights and the energy of the city, and obviously like simultaneously learning the language. It was like so exciting and interesting, and then it just gave me like this huge motivation when I came back to want to continue learning it. And so I never really went. I went back to China just for like visiting a few times, but never to live. That was the only time I actually spent living in China.
And that was for a 1-year period?
Yeah.
And so when you got back, if
Yeah.
your current Chinese level is at 100%, what
Right.
percentage were you at that point?
That's a good question. The honest answer is I really don't remember. Like I can't tell you how, like, what level I will say, like, looking back at old videos, like, every so often I'll go back and, like, look at video. And even recently I posted one where I was, like, interviewed in Chinese in Chicago, like, 2011. My accent has changed a lot. Like, back then I spoke with, like, this really thick Beijing accent because I had just spent so much time there. Now I speak with a much more not Beijing accent, kind of like a mix of, like, Southern Chinese and American and, like,
that's really interesting.
Whatever, yeah.
So I know you said you don't really remember, but if you had to, like, get, like, a super rough estimate, like 50%, like 25%.
You know, it's interesting. It might have even been better in some ways.
Oh yeah.
I would say probably, like, because I was just in, like, a 24/7 just, like, doing Chinese. I probably know a lot more Chinese. Like, my reading ability, listening ability is probably a lot better. Day-to-day fluency, yeah, I probably better. I don't know. I would say like maybe like 70, 80.
Okay, so that would you say it's really that year where a lot of, like, where it really happened for your
that was the major point. Yeah, that was the major point. Like, at the end of that year, I was like fluent. Like, I was fluent, but, like, fluent plus. Like, I was really good. You know, like, but, like, basically as good as I am now. You know, like, so I don't know.
Yeah. So that means that you must have made an insane amount of progress in that 1 year. So
yeah.
And I know you had an older channel called Ari in Beijing that I used to watch back in the day, where you would kind of talk about AJATT a little bit.
Right.
And so what kind of is your history with that? And is that when you were in China, when you were kind of taking some influence from...
Well, that's I basically did AJATT that whole year. I mean, I for if you don't know what AJATT is, I mean, I feel like most viewers are probably do know what that is, but you know, it's this guy who in Utah who, like, learned Japanese fluency in 18 months, right? And I found about that website because when I first started the university that year, I was kind of interested in, like, learning language. I was like, man, I really like doing this, but I want to get better. Like, when I started that year...
So this is when you're in China?
Yeah, when I started that year, like, I was, like, conversational. Like, I wasn't really good. Like I could say some things. I could, like, talk with people. I've always been good with accents, so people would always be impressed. But, like, I wasn't really able to have, like, a strong conversation with somebody in Chinese.
And at that point, you had just been basically taking the classes at your college.
Yeah, pretty much, right. So when I started that, and then also I did this thing called Princeton in Beijing the summer before I started that university. And after doing that was, like, a super intense 24/7. Like, you're not allowed to speak English in the entire program, even with the other American college students.
So this is in the U.S.?
No, this was in Beijing.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, we did a 2-month, like, summer program in Beijing.
Okay, right, but to kind of prepare you for the rest of the year.
Yeah, exactly, right. So I did that, and, like, after that, I would say, like, conversationally fluent. You know, like, I have a conversation, you know, but I wasn't, like, really good, and so, but I wanted to be, like, really good at Chinese.
Yeah.
I was like, how do I get there, you know? And so I was like, just like Googling around. I forget exactly how I found it. I think it might have been a friend who introduced me to it. I don't really remember, but I found out about it somehow. And I was like, wow, this dude's method seems pretty intense and interesting. And I was like, you know, I have this whole year in China where I'm doing nothing but, like, learning Chinese. I have no other responsibilities. I have no family. Like, I have, you know, like I think Louis C.K. once made a joke. He's like, when you're, like, 26, if you die right now, nobody cares. Like, your mom might cry a little bit, but, like, what? So I was like, oh, you know what? This is great. This is, like, a perfect opportunity to try and hone my language as much as possible. So I was like, all right, let me do this. So I did, like, at a certain point, I was doing, like, 300 new Anki reps per day. New cards. I'm not even talking about
300
reps.
new cards?
Yeah.
That's absolutely insane.
Right. So, it might not have been 300 new. It might have been, like, 200 new ones. But then the total number of reps was, like, 500 or... I was a lot. Right?
Okay.
So I was doing a lot of Anki. But
how many hours a day were you spending
all of them.
on?
I was just...
So you were mostly just sitting on Anki.
No, okay. I was doing probably like 2 or 3 hours of Anki.
Okay.
But
That's still a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I was also doing spending a lot of time just like talking to people.
Mm-hmm.
I had a girlfriend in Chinese, so I was talking to her a lot. I had friends in Chinese at that university, because the university was a Chinese university. There was lots of Chinese people there, obviously, right? So I was talking with them in Chinese, like hanging out with them. I was talking to people outside, right? Like I would go into restaurants and order stuff, or in the cafeteria, you talk to people in Chinese, right? I was taking classes in Chinese. So,
and I'm guessing pretty much no English at all?
Yeah, there was no English that entire year. I mean, I had an American friend there, but we tried to speak in Chinese. The only person that I really spoke English to that year, obviously outside from occasional Skype calls with my parents, was this Australian guy we tried to speak Chinese, but his Chinese wasn't great, so we mostly spoke English.
Wow, so that's really intense. And then what about, did you also like consume Chinese media at the time, or did you I know Katsumoto talked about having headphones on a lot.
I did the whole headphone strategy. I did just what like so what I really started with every morning, the first thing I did when I woke up, we all had TVs in our room. So I just turned on the TV like first thing and just started blasting like Chinese news. That was the main thing that I kind of watched like passively, was just CCTV, which is like the state news channel. And it's very like, ironically, Chinese news is it's really like calming. Like it's very the news is just very like it's so sedate, and like it was really nice actually. So I just had that in my room, and also that was the main, and then I learned a lot from the advertisements too. You just hear the ads over and over again, and like to this day there are certain ads where I'm like, well, how do I roll it? Like I know exactly how to say it, and but these are ads from like 2008, so like people won't get the references now. But that, and then plus the other thing that I did was just the whole Katsumoto inspiration of wanting to do audio, like every like wasted minute is another potential wasted minute of not listening to your target language. So I just had like headphones in when I'd be like walking to the cafeteria. I'd just be like I would just download these MP3s and just put them onto my little I still have the device actually. It's a little back before smartphones. It was just like a little like Sony like clicky MP3 player. So I just had that going 24/7 wherever I was walking. I'd just be listening to stuff in Chinese.
So you were living it literally all Chinese all the time.
Yeah, I was doing all Chinese all the time.
To the max, pretty much.
Basically, it was great.
And so for the Anki, I know a lot of people in my audience are also big fans of Anki.
Yeah.
Like, where were you making? What were the cards consisting of, and were you making them based off of reading material, or what were you doing with regards to that?
So what I started doing that, like the way that I kind of seeded that deck was, I think initially what I did was, I went and found a like every time when I would think of something that I wanted to say, like I would think, like every time I ran into a situation in real life where I was like, how do I say this? I don't know how to say that. Why don't I know how to say that? I need to know how to say this, right? I would go with like a real life person, and I would say like I would just ask her like how do you like I found a tutor, and I would say how do I say this, and she would just write down the sentence, and I would put the sentence into Anki. After a certain point, I just kind of like it was too much of a hassle to meet with the tutor every time, so I did something that in retrospect was kind of stupid. But what I did was I had there was this program called Lingos. Have you ever heard of Lingos?
Sounds familiar.
Lingoes. I don't know. But basically what it was like a compilation of dictionaries. It was like a sentence database. Yeah. So you would just search, I would just put in that word that I wanted to know how to say, and in the sentence database would pop up relevant sentences. And so I was like, okay, this sentence is something that I need to know how to say. And so, I just, I would put that sentence into my Anki, and I would memorize that. I would memorize that sentence or phrase.
And so, like, would you have the phrase on the front and then the translation on the back?
Yeah, I think what I did, usually what I tried to do to increase the recall was I put the English on the front.
Okay, so you're doing the active recall,
right? So, which I've always found like is like such a better way to learn, because if it's just Chinese on the front, like it doesn't, like the point of Anki for me was always to, when I found that situation in real life, was that I would know that thing, and then I would think about it and just try to actually use it.
I think active recall definitely is better for training active recall. Kind of makes sense, but for me, the reason why I don't really like it is because it leads you to kind of associate one-to-one connections between English and the language you're studying.
Right.
When in reality, like normally the languages are so different that if you kind of are still like having this English thought and just being like, oh, this English thought equals this Chinese sentence. Right. It can kind of lead you to maybe say some unnatural stuff or misinterpret some subtlety.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it also does depend on the type of like what your purpose of doing Anki. The purpose for me doing Anki, it was less about, like, there were occasions where I was like, I heard something on the news where I was like, I really want to know that. For me, it was more a way to remember a thing that, like, if I was hanging out with some people and I was like, shit, how do you say, like, pass the pen that's over there? Like, I was like, why don't I know how to say that? I need to know how to say that. I would learn how to say that, and then I would put the English in the Anki, so that my idea was like, I'm never going to know how to, like, I need to know how to remember past that thing over there. That's what I wanted to know how to do. So that's kind of, for me, what I use Anki for.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It was like very practical. It was very like, I'm living this language right now, and I'm using Anki to fill in all the holes that
But it can also be practical in another sense. Like, if you're watching a lot of media and you want to use Anki to remember to learn how to know media, then active recall isn't as important as just like you put the Japanese or the Chinese on the front of the card. That makes sense if what you're doing is you just want to know how to increase listening comprehension or reading comprehension.
Yeah, that's kind of what I did with Japanese. It was very comprehension based, and then the idea was that once I had a really high comprehension, I just had a huge total amount of input that I had understood. Then the output kind of came naturally. But the cost is that it takes a lot of time to get to that point.
Right.
Like that strategy wouldn't have worked if I was like, okay, I want to be able to be really fluent by the end of this year.
Right.
Then you have to make it more about speaking from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of sounds like what you're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that makes sense then why you got so good at Chinese over the course of this one single year.
Yeah.
So you really kind of went balls to the wall.
Right.
With doing Chinese all the time. So when you got back, do you remember how you felt about Chinese? Were you kind of like, okay, I've reached the top of the mountain? Or are you like, okay, I'm going to keep this going?
Yeah, I felt like when I got back, I definitely felt a sense of like achievement for having learned what I did. But I also felt like this thing that I learned is something that is always going to be a part of me, and I don't want to forget. So I wanted to put myself into a situation where I could both improve what I was learning, but also constantly maintain it. So the year I got back, I moved at University of Chicago. There was an international house, so I moved there, where there were students from all over the world, including from China, to just kind of keep it up.
Cool. And then another thing I'm curious about is, were you reading Chinese too, or was it mostly just the spoken language?
Not really. I mean, I was reading from time to time, but my main form of exposure to written Chinese was just like signs and stuff, and obviously schoolwork, but then also texting people.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, that was the main reason why I needed it. And still to this day, like I don't really read in Chinese. Like I mean, occasionally I will, but not like the main reason for me was the speaking. But also like I did learn to read, and I do still use it because like I text to people, and I also read stuff online. Like if I do research. I also spent 2 years just making videos in Chinese for a Chinese audience, so I had to know enough Chinese to be able to do that. But and I can read like pretty okay in Chinese. It's just slower than English.
I see.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to talk to hear that, because it sounds like we had almost opposite approaches to. Although we were both kind of guided by these AJATT principles. Yeah. I was very reading based and very comprehension based, and I spent the bulk of the first couple of years I spent learning Japanese, like trying to master reading novels, so that like learning every word that I could find. Yeah. And then speaking was like not really a priority.
Right.
So
it's interesting because sometimes I think like if I had spent more time reading like initially, or even now, honestly, like if I wanted to, I'm sure that I could increase my reading ability and reading speed. No doubt. I just don't particularly want to. It's not something like you know, if I wanted to read like a Chinese novel, I could just read it in English. Like for me,
practically speaking.
For me, I mean, I do think it would have some nice knock-on effects to your speaking, like because my Chinese is very good, but it's not perfect, right? It's not like it's not native ugly either. Like it's close, but it's not like especially when you're having conversations with more educated topics. There's definitely lots of gaps in my Chinese. And if I wanted to, you know, for sure I could go and like the way that I would do it is by probably something what you did, like spending more time with media, you know, like whether it's TV, movies, books especially, right, to really increase that like that aspect of my Chinese. For me, it's just something where like I don't like. I could go the extra mile to get to that level. I just don't really want to. Or really need to.
I mean, if you don't feel anything lacking in like your current ability, then and it's never too late.
Well, there is something lacking in my current ability, but that's I mean, it's a gap that I don't really particularly.
I mean, a lack in the sense of like there's something that you wish you could do that you're not able to do, or you're like having troubles due to a lack. Or
well, no, but that is the thing. Like I do wish I could read Chinese novels, like really well, you know. But I just. My calculation is it's just not worth the effort that it would take to get there. You know, for me to really be able to like read Chinese really, really well would take like a good amount of time.
Yeah, I can tell you it took me fucking forever to do that with Japanese.
Exactly, and I just don't like. I'm like,
I guess
I just don't really want to.
Cost benefit.
Like I speak pretty well already, so I'm like I just don't.
And it's never too late. You could decide when you like retire and you're like 80, you'd be like, okay, now's the time.
Right. Now is the time when I go learn how to write classical Chinese poetry. That's always been like I have the book. I don't see it, but that's a goal one day. Learn classical Chinese. I'd love to be able to read like Confucius in the original. Yeah, you know, it would be cool. But
cool. Yeah, and then so just one last question that I have before we move on to talking about being a creator. Yep. So for that Anki deck that you had, did you stop repping it when you came back from China?
Yeah, you know, I think I kept it up for I don't like exactly remember it, but it's at some point it just like it was like too much of a burden. Like I was just like, this is like it just got to a point where I was spending way too much time on it and for not that much spent. Like I realized that the way you make the cards is really important, and I think that sometimes, like, especially if you're putting in stuff that you, at the time, you think, like, this is a great idea. Like, I was using Anki to memorize, like, the list of, like, the Shang and Zhou dynasty kings, and it was just, like, at some point, I was just, like, going through, oh, yes, and the king of the second Western Zhou dynasty was, I was just, like, what? And like on the back of the card was like the dates he reigned from. I was just like, why am I doing this? Like who cares, you know? And I was just like, I just dropped it at some point. It just wasn't really working for me.
I've been there. Any estimate at how many cards you had at the
a lot. Like I think it was somewhere around like the 10K range.
Oh yeah,
I think probably, I don't know, something like that, even more.
Very cool to hear. Very cool to hear.
Hey guys, so I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Xiaoma interview. Just a reminder, in a couple of days I'm going to be uploading part 2 of the interview where we dive in depth into Xiaoma's pretty intense journey to becoming such a successful creator on YouTube. So make sure to subscribe if you want to catch that. Also, again, reminder, make sure to check out refill.la if you're learning a language, and also sign up to my email newsletter at mattversusjapan.com if you want to get every once in a while, little nuggets of language learning wisdom. And next week, I'm going to be sending out part 2 of the behind the scenes footage from when I was in New York with Xiaoma, and we were walking around downtown and talking to Japanese people in Japanese. So thanks again so much to everyone who watched this far, and I'll see you guys in the next one.